All right, let's dive right into this explainer. And honestly, we're just going to throw you directly into the deep end today. Welcome to the Brain Breaker Sandbox. In this one, we're exploring the absolute limits of ethics, morality, and even human identity itself. We're going to look at some of the most famous philosophical paradoxes ever conceived just to see how you, yes, you, react when there are literally no easy answers. So let's not waste any time. Picture this. You are immediately faced with a visceral life or death choice. Imagine you're stuck in a sinking lifeboat with a bunch of complete strangers. Now, if you all stay and constantly bail water together, you're still going to sink and drown in 5 hours. But suddenly, you notice your best friend is in a nearby, perfectly safe boat, and they've got room for exactly one more person. They beckon you over. Here's the catch. If you jump ship, the strangers you leave behind will lose the manpower they need to keep bailing, and they'll drown in just 2 hours instead of 5. So what do? Do you decrease the survival time of strangers to guarantee your own safety, or do you risk drowning with them? Now, that lifeboat scenario right there, that perfectly illustrates a genuine ethical dilemma. See, it's not some simple choice between right and wrong. That would be way too easy. It's a crushing right versus right situation. You're trapped in a scenario where every single available choice is on some level completely morally wrong. You are totally stuck between conflicting moral imperatives. And look, this brilliantly illustrates a concept philosophers call moral residue. It's that inescapable, backward-looking emotion of guilt or remorse. Even if you make the most logical, rational choice in that lifeboat, the outcome is still going to feel dirty. You are going to feel guilt because you were forced to fail one of your moral obligations, regardless of what you decided to do. It just sticks with you. Okay, let's test this even further with a variation of Philippa Foot's classic 1967 trolley problem. You've probably heard of it, but this is the Fat Man variation. A runaway trolley is hurtling down the tracks toward 5 unaware workers. You happen to be standing on a bridge right above the tracks next to a very large, heavy man. The absolute only way to stop the trolley and save those 5 workers is to push this man off the bridge and onto the tracks, sacrificing him. So, would you do it? It really tests exactly how comfortable you are with getting your hands dirty to save lives. So this scenario creates a really stark philosophical divide. On one side, you have the utilitarian view, which relies on cold, hard math. It's all about maximizing survival. One death is objectively better than 5, making that push an actual obligation. But on the flip side, the deontological view argues that human lives are incommensurable. You can't just trade them like playing cards. Actively participating in a moral wrong, like pushing an innocent person to their death, is strictly prohibited. You just cannot use a human being merely as a means to an end. Now, it's super easy to sit and debate this in a comfortable classroom, right? But what happens in real life? Well, the YouTuber Vsauce actually simulated a highly realistic trolley problem in a real train switching station, making the participants believe actual lives were on the line. And guess what? A full 5 out of the 7 participants completely froze. They straight up refused to pull the lever. It really goes to show that when the immense psychological weight of active participation bears down on us, all that clean utilitarian math just goes right out the window. Moving right along to Act 2, the interpersonal and the self. All right, so now that we've explored the visceral weight of life and death, let's raise the stakes by adding another unpredictable human mind into the mix. Framed by researchers back in 1950, this is the famous prisoner's dilemma. Imagine you and an accomplice get arrested, and you're tossed into solitary confinement. The prosecutor offers both of you a deal. You can either remain silent, which means cooperating with your partner, or you can confess and completely betray them. But since you can't communicate with your partner at all, you're forced into this incredibly tense game of blind trust versus rational betrayal. Let's actually break down the game theory math on this. If you both cooperate, you get a mutual reward. Let's call it 3 points. But if you defect and betray a silent partner, you get the highest possible payoff of 5. Meanwhile, your partner gets the dreaded sucker's payoff of 0. Ouch. But if you both betray each other, you both get a pretty low punishment score of 1. And you know what the cruel irony here is? Rational self-interest mathematically drives both players to defect. You will almost always end up betraying each other for that lesser payoff, just because you don't want to risk the sucker's outcome to achieve a mutual reward. Now, we throw around the phrase self-interest a lot in these dilemmas, but let's hit pause for a second and ask a really fundamental question. Who exactly is the self making these choices in the first place? Before we can truly evaluate our ethics, we have to bend our brains just a bit with a paradox of human identity. This was actually first brought up by the Greek philosopher Plutarch way back in 75 CE. So, imagine the mythical King Theseus returns from his adventures, and his ship is carefully preserved in a harbor as a monument. Over the decades, of course, the wood begins to rot. So the Athenians gradually step in and replace every single decaying plank with brand new timber. Year by year, piece by piece, the original materials are swapped out, until eventually, absolutely not a single original piece of wood remains. And here is the ontological question that just totally breaks your brain. At exactly what stage did that vessel cease to be his ship? If every single physical part has been substituted over time, is it fundamentally still the same object? I mean, think about your own body for a second. Your cells are constantly dying off and being replaced. Are you really the exact same self you were 10 years ago? English philosopher Thomas Hobbes eventually came along and escalated this paradox beautifully. He asked, well, what if a shipbuilder secretly collected all of those discarded, rotting original planks? What if he took them over to another dock and reconstructed the ship exactly as it originally was? So we now have two ships. One has the continuous history of sitting in the harbor, but it's made of completely new wood. The other is made of the exact original materials. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? So, how on earth do we solve this? Well, a modern psychological resolution suggests we might actually be looking at it wrong. The identity isn't held in the wood itself. Instead, identity is found in the act of taking responsibility. The ship's identity is maintained through the continuous human agency and care that was applied to preserve its purpose. By that logic, you are essentially the sum of the responsibilities you choose to take on over time. Which brings us to Act 3, the grand scale of society. Let's zoom way out. If individual human beings are inherently biased, self-interested, and, as we just saw, constantly changing, how could we ever possibly design a totally fair civilization? Enter the American political philosopher John Rawls. To design a truly just society, Rawls argued we must start from what he called the original position, standing behind a veil of ignorance. Imagine you're tasked with writing the rules for a brand new society, but you have absolutely no idea who you will be within it. You're completely blind to your future wealth, ethnicity, gender, or even your physical abilities. Operating from behind this veil, Rawls says that even purely self-interested people will logically adopt a maximum strategy, meaning maximizing the minimum. Because, hey, you might end up at the very bottom of this new society, right? So you'll naturally design two principles of justice. First, absolute equal basic liberties for everyone, and second, any social or economic inequalities must be arranged to specifically benefit the least advantaged members. You protect the bottom, just in case that's exactly where you land. We have covered a massive amount of ground in this explainer today, from sinking lifeboats all the way to the foundational frameworks of societal justice. But sometimes, it really helps to just distill all this high-level philosophy into a single guiding anchor. And this powerful quote cuts right through the noise. Doing what's right isn't always easy, but it is always right. Whether you're sweating over a runaway trolley or trying to conceptually structure a whole civilization, acting ethically requires immense courage. And to put that courage to the test, let's take a look at this final framework, the concentric circles of values, originally developed by Rushworth Kidder. Think about it. If you found a dropped $20 bill on the floor, you would easily return it to a family member, right? You'd probably return it to a friend, too. But the true test of your moral courage is how far out you are willing to project that honesty. Do you return it to a neighbor, a total stranger on the street, a billionaire? And that leads us perfectly to the ultimate question. It's a lingering thought I really want you to take with you long after this explainer ends. How far out do you live your ethics? Do your morals stop at your front door, applying only to your immediate tight-knit inner circle? Or do you actually have the courage to extend your ethics all the way out to the entire world? Take some time to really chew on that, and we'll see you in the next explainer.